Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya. Same awesome Naya. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you all are doing great. This young man again came out with his videos, and some of his people are not liking it. And he started with the Spartans were not white. He gave his reasons why he said Spartans were not white, and he talked about how African warriors and some other warriors how they were able to do some certain things and all that. So he also talked about how white people have always run goofy as hell. Man, this man, I don't know, but it is really very funny. I'm not going to lie to you. It is very funny that I almost at some point started crying, wanted to, burst. It burst into laughter. And I see some of his people trying to tell him, why do you hate being white and all that? And I also see some of them, being goofy also in the comment section, telling him to give us some break and all that. Yeah, I love the fact that he is bold enough to come out to explain some certain things because, there has always been so many whitewashed history and how some people, try so much to colonize other people's work or other people's experiences. I don't know, should I say experiences or art or crafts and try so hard to make it like it is them that invented it and all that. I don't know if that does make sense, but I have so far since I started talking about history and making research, so many things that are not right. And that also needs to be corrected. Let's get into this video.
The Spartans were not white, and history proves it. White people love to claim Spartans as their ancient warrior ancestors, but the only thing they would have done in battle is get sunburned. Spartans lived in the Mediterranean, not Scandinavia. They had trade, religious, and military ties to Africa and the Middle East. They were described as dark-skinned by their own contemporaries. They did not look like the cast of 300 because that was a movie, not a documentary. Even other Greeks thought they were weird, which is saying something. At some point, we have to ask, if Spartans were truly white, why does history keep making that idea look ridiculous? Sparta was in the Mediterranean, not the Arctic Circle. Sparta was located in the southern part of Greece, known for olives, sunshine, and not producing blonde-haired Vikings. They were part of the Mediterranean world, meaning they had trade and cultural exchanges with Egyptians, Phoenicians, and Persians. Genetic studies show that ancient Greeks, including Spartans, were a mix of Aegean, Middle Eastern, and Northern African ancestry. Meanwhile, Northern Europeans at the time were mostly just trying to figure out fire. In 480 BCE, the height of Spartan military dominance, Northern Europeans were living in tribal societies without written language. The Greeks referred to them as barbarians, which is ancient Greek for, we don't take these people seriously. Sparta had more in common with Egypt than with Viking reenactment festivals. White people weren't inheriting Spartan culture. They were just hoping no one checks a map. Greek civilization, including Sparta, was shaped by trade with Egypt, Anatolia, and Levant. They borrowed military and religious traditions from non-white civilizations. Their gods, myths, and architecture all show clear foreign influence. Their art depicts a range of skin tones, none of which match the cast of Gladiator. Meanwhile, Northern Europeans had no connection to Sparta. Spartans never fought alongside Germanic tribes or Celtic warriors. They didn't sail to Scandinavia to teach them about democracy. No Spartan ever carved "We are white" into a marble column. White people weren't shaping Spartan history. They were just inserting themselves into it centuries later. Greek sculptures and pottery depict Spartans with dark or olive skin. Greek writers describe them as tough, rugged, and militaristic, not pale, blonde, and delicate. They wore hairstyles and clothing similar to their North African and Middle Eastern neighbors. At no point did anyone in ancient Greece say, "Wow, these guys remind me of Norwegians." Meanwhile, Northern Europeans looked like this at the time. No written language, no organized state, no marble statues, just wooden carvings, and possibly some rocks. White people weren't Spartan descendants. They were still figuring out soap when Sparta fell. The movie 300 falsely portrayed Spartans as a gym bro fantasy instead of actual warriors. They didn't fight in leather underwear. They wore armor. See, I didn't laugh. They weren't all jacked like fitness influencers. They were malnourished by modern standards. They were real people, not an Abercrombie ad with swords. They lived in a rigid, militarized state where children were raised more by the government than by their families. They weren't fighting for freedom. They ran a brutal slave society where helots did all of the work. They weren't individualists. They practiced state-mandated collectivism that would make even the most hardcore communist rethink their stance. White people weren't honoring Spartan culture. They were rewriting it to try to make themselves look cool. White nationalists cling to Sparta because they have no ancient civilizations of their own. They needed a European warrior society to idolize, and Rome was a bit too multicultural for their taste. They ignore the parts of Sparta that don't fit their ideology, like their reliance on enslaved labor. They cherry-pick Spartan militarism while ignoring their actual political structure. They turn a historically multi-ethnic society into a white nationalist fairy tale. Meanwhile, the real Spartans had no interest in racial purity. They fought alongside non-Greeks when it suited them. They weren't writing "Save Western Civilization" in their battle speeches. They collapsed because their rigid social structures made them completely inflexible. White nationalists weren't inspired by Sparta. They were desperate for a past that doesn't include medieval mud huts. If the Spartans were truly white, why does all historical evidence say the exact opposite? Cope. White people have always run goofy as hell, and it shows. White people love to imagine themselves as history's greatest warriors, explorers, and athletes. Yet history shows that they have always run like malfunctioning puppets. Their battle strategies were designed around standing still as long as possible to avoid moving too much. Their historical paintings of runners look like someone described running to an artist who had never seen it before. They spent centuries in clothing so impractical they could barely walk, let alone sprint. They needed entire sports and rituals just to prepare themselves for basic movement. Even today, their most famous running moments involve dramatic stumbles, slow-motion falls, and last-place finishes that somehow get framed as inspirational. At some point, we have to ask, if white people were naturally built for running, why has history spent centuries trying to accommodate their inability to do it properly? White warfare was built to minimize running. Ancient European battle formations, phalanxes, shield walls, trench warfare were designed to require as little movement as possible. Medieval knights wore armor so heavy that running meant waddling at best. Even when guns replaced swords, white military strategy revolved around standing in lines and shooting, rather than running toward anything. They abandoned mobility-based combat entirely, preferring instead static formations and brute force over agility. Meanwhile, other civilizations built warfare around speed and mobility. Mongols developed horseback archery, allowing them to move at full speed while attacking. Indigenous warriors in the Americas used hit-and-run tactics because they could actually run. African military formations relied on speed and agility, not just standing in place and hoping for the best. White people weren't winning wars through agility. They were inventing excuses to avoid moving. Historical art shows that white people have never run correctly. Medieval European tapestries show runners with rigid, unnatural postures, as if their knees just learned how to exist. Renaissance paintings depict runners with one leg so far forward, it looks like they're being dragged by an invisible force. Early photos of European races show runners grimacing like they're questioning all of their life choices. Even Olympic footage from the early 20th century shows white sprinters moving with the biomechanics of a poorly animated cartoon. Meanwhile, other civilizations captured movement accurately. Ancient Egyptian and Chinese artwork show runners in realistic movement, with natural posture and proper stride. Indigenous petroglyphs depict runners in effortless, fluid movement, rather than a desperate struggle against gravity. Even early Roman and Middle Eastern art got running right, making later European failures even more embarrassing. White people weren't defining athleticism. They were redefining what it means to look confused in motion. White society was designed to discourage running. Medieval and Renaissance European courts saw running as something peasants did, Nobility walked, even in emergencies. Victorian-era fashion made running physically impossible. Corsets, heavy gowns, stiff shoes that ensured speed was never an option. Even their casual clothing prioritized looking proper over functionality. Public running was considered undignified for most of European history, which explains why so many of them still look uncomfortable doing it. Meanwhile, other cultures built their societies around practical movement. Nomadic groups in Asia and Africa prioritized mobility, not rigid formality. Indigenous people designed clothing that allowed for unrestricted movement. Asian and African warriors wore flexible armor that allowed them to sprint when needed. White people weren't creating civilization. They were creating barriers to movement. White people keep inventing alternative sports to avoid sprinting. They created golf so they could pretend walking is a sport. They came up with skiing, cycling, and ice skating. Anything to keep their feet from directly touching the ground. They made track and field about jumping over things, throwing objects, or running in circles instead of just a straight line. Even jogging culture revolves around pacing, gear, and marathons, where finishing is more important than winning. Meanwhile, other civilizations just ran normally. Tarahumara runners in Mexico mastered long-distance running with simple sandals and efficient strides. Jamaican sprinters don't need a smartwatch to track their strides. East African runners don't require a hydration pack and a playlist to maintain speed. White people weren't excelling at running. They were excelling at finding alternatives to it. White running form has always been a struggle. They overextend their strides like they're trying to reach safety before the ground disappears. They either flail their arms too much or keep them locked in place, like they're waiting for flight clearance. They lean forward excessively, as if gravity itself is conspiring against them. They grimace and strain with every step, as if their body is resisting the idea to move quickly. Meanwhile, other civilizations just run. African and Caribbean sprinters maintain smooth, controlled movement without unnecessary theatrics. Indigenous runners cover long distances with ease, not panic. White people weren't evolving running. They were trying to survive it. The most famous white running moments are failures. Their most viral running clips involve dramatic stumbles, last-placed finishes, and emotional collapses at the finish line. They celebrate heroic losses in races because actually winning is too much pressure. They romanticize struggling through marathons more than breaking records. They turned Rocky's training montage into an iconic moment, even though his running form was painfully inefficient. Meanwhile, other civilizations just win races. Jamaican sprinters dominate track events effortlessly. Ethiopian runners have made marathon supremacy. Tarahumara endurance runners don't even consider a 100-mile race a big deal. White people weren't redefining running. They were redefining losing gracefully. If white people were truly natural runners, why does history show they spent centuries trying to find alternatives? Cope.
This this is all I got from this video, and it is the cope for me. Trust me, this man is, I don't know how to explain it, but he's really been giving it to them back to back. They won't say I am the one that said, I mean, your brother is the one doing the job. So I was going through the comment section. I think I saw something that looked like, why do you hate being white? You see, this is really like affecting them so bad. I don't know if it's affecting them, but this particular one, this particular comment, it tells it all. Why do you hate being white? I don't know, man, but this is like real. But one thing I'm going to say is that I love how bold he is doing this job, doing his doing it. And a lot of people actually appreciate his work. And some are like, man, you are right on track. You know what you are saying, especially when it comes to the Spartan, like, the way the Spartans were not black and all of that. Yeah. And the reality is that I love all the information that he is giving to us. And I love how accurate also he is in most of his findings, and how a lot of things, I don't know how to say it, so many misinformation that has been spread through history, or should I say whitewash history, and also how some people try to make it look like they are the one that dominated or dominates everything, or that owns everything, or that every civilization and all that started from them and the rest of it. So yeah, I think he's doing a great job for any. I know I see some people. Okay, I don't have to talk about this though. I don't know if this guy is white or I don't know, but his name is George. George, and it kind of sounds Serbian. I don't know, but maybe he is from Serbian or somewhere else. But yeah, Black history angers so many people, but some people really do not understand it. But I love the fact that someone is out there spreading the message and the news, and I hope they can also cope with it, right? And I just enjoyed it, and it was also very funny the way he was so busy roasting them back to back to back, back to back. All right, I will see you all in my next video. Bye for now. Cool. Bye.